Cheers, guys. Epix911, welcome to the Elitist Geek. There are certain aspects of gaming that tend to kind of get overlooked. And everybody either knows the person or has been that person at some point or another. You know, case in point, you purchase an awesome state-of-the-art video card and you pair it with a 17-inch monitor, right? Or you buy the best sound system, you know, Creative Labs, Sound Blaster, awesome, for $300. And you pair it with dollar store speakers or earbuds, God forbid, right? To me, controls are usually lumped into that. And I know there was some conversation around my Rift video. And, you know, just let me state, just in my defense, because looking back at that video, absolutely I came across as biased. And like I said, as a guy who calls himself the elitist gamer, because I was a snob for a long time, I was a PC gaming anti-kind of console snob, even though I started with consoles in the arcades. It took me a while to kind of shake that off and become what I consider myself now, which is platform agnostic. But every once in a while, stuff like that video creeps up. And I didn't catch it myself, but one of you guys caught it. And you're absolutely correct. Reading it back now, or watching it back now, it sounded like I was really putting down the Rift. And in a sense I was, right? But it is a platform I'm really excited about. And the same person also pointed out that it's the competition of these devices, right, that keep everybody on their toes. It keeps everybody honest. And the more competition you have in a free market society, the better the consumer ultimately does, right? So I just want to be clear that I am getting a Rift. They told me August. I hope it's earlier, because Eve Valkyrie is a game specifically available right now for the Rift, not for the HTC Vive until the end of the year, that I really want to play. So with that said, what's another area that we tend to take for granted as gamers? Some of us don't, and hats off to those people, but some of us do, and I've certainly been guilty of this in the past, and that's control scheme. So the one thing I do maintain is launching the Rift with one of these, while it gives everybody a good controller to play Dark Souls with, probably wasn't the ideal that the Rift folks themselves would have liked, right? They probably would have wanted the equivalent of their motion controller to have shipped with the product in time. But I understand it's a little late, little delayed, but it will be here. Well, let's talk about controls a little bit. So, to me, I think equally as important as the video card, as the fast processor, as the monitor, as the speakers, is having a good control set, right? A good control set can break or make the immersion. Let's talk about Elite Dangerous, for example. Elite Dangerous, and I could be wrong on this, but I believe the game model for your on-screen avatar, when you look down, you see yourself holding a HOTAS, right? So your throttle and your flight stick. And I believe that was based on the Cytec X52 Pro, but I could be wrong, maybe the Warthog. But I thought I'd read somewhere it was based on one of those. Anyways, the difference between playing Elite Dangerous with a gamepad or a true flight stick is night and day, right? There are options, because you could look at that same Cytec X52 Pro that I talked about, and it's about $250, right? It isn't cheap, but there are cheaper options. And not necessarily bad ergonomically either, right? So let's take a look at this, for example. So this is the Thrustmaster. It's a HOTAS Thrustmaster 4, right? This replaced the Thrustmaster X, which was PC PS3. This is the kind of upgraded version for PlayStation 4/PC. So depending on what firmware version you have, and Logitech, as with most of their stuff, has made it pretty straightforward to flash. You may or may not have the PC-friendly firmware already installed in the unit, right? But don't let the PlayStation logo scare you off. This works fine as a USB controller device on a PC. You just need to have the latest firmware. You go to their website, plug in the USB device, and update. Really, it just takes a few seconds. But what does this offer? Well, like I said, the flight stick for your in-game avatar was based on a HOTAS configuration, right? So a flight stick with a throttle. So what I've done is, you can see I've got Velcro on the bottom, is I've really nerded it up in that I've actually put Velcro straps on my desk at the exact same distance and proximity as the on-screen avatar, right? Because let me tell you, if you've got a really good sound system, which I have, and a really good audio system, I've got some nice Sennheiser earphones, but then you also have the flight stick and throttle, it is so damn immersive, because literally you look down, and as your on-screen avatar pitches down or pitches up or rotates or hell throttles up, you see your on-screen avatar do the exact same thing. So you move forward, the hand moves forward. That can't be understated. That is such a freaking awesome experience. Not to mention, it just makes flying fun with one of these, right? So what I've done is, and careful with the stick, because by default it uses only 4/8 axis, right? And what I mean by that is, so what I've done here is I've got the throttle forward, back, right? In Elite, for example, and then I've got thrust left, thrust right, thrust up, thrust down. The problem is in its default orientation, the left and right, ends up sharing the same axis as left and right on the joystick, right? So just going into the control panel, so you go into devices on Windows 10, Windows 7, click on properties, set your HOTAS 4 to 5/8 axis mode as opposed to 4/8. That will make sure that these are mapped independent, right? Because it was driving me nuts for the longest time. I'd be, well, I'm thrusting left and right, but now I'm turning the ship, and they would keep superseding each other, right? So just change it to 5/8, flash the firmware, and you're good to go. This is an $80 flight stick combo. You compare that to the Cytec X52, which granted, and the Warthogs are much sturdier, right? But you know what? This is literally a third the price, and it gives you probably 90% of the feel and almost 100% of the functionality, right? Granted, they have more buttons, but all the basics are covered with this, right? So don't feel just because you have a flight stick and throttle, or you don't have one, that there aren't cheaper options. There are, and I highly, highly recommend this, all right? So that'll see you in good stead for basically any cockpit style game, space, flying, dogfighting, World War II. That has you covered, all right? The other controller, if you still want a flight stick, but you want to go even cheaper, this was the original controller I had. It's also Logitech. It's called the 3D Extreme Pro, all right? This is a $40 flight stick. A $40 flight stick, which in my opinion, if the HOTAS unit here had this stick, it would be perfect. And Elite is, programmed well enough that you could theoretically have this plugged in with your HOTAS and go dual throttle or a dual flight stick, right? And mimic throttle with this. That's certainly possible, but you don't even have to go overboard. You can use, this axis here for throttling, and you can definitely assign some of these buttons for thrusters. And that's what I did originally, right? So that way you've got your turn left, roll left, thrust left, thrust right, up, down, and thrust forward and backwards, all on one stick. So that's the $40 option, and again, that's the Extreme 3D Pro from Logitech, a super awesome and sturdy stick. So these are all controls that really help with the immersion factor. And I mentioned that in the last video, that when you look down, right, and you see yourself holding the controller in your hand, they can represent that as whatever in the game, a sword, like a katana, a machine gun, a rifle. Your body, your brain makes that connection because the feel is just, it's a good universal feel, right? There's still one more controller, and this is a controller that I've had forever, but much like a control is important for a space cockpit game, this one is equally important for a car cockpit style game, right? So I originally purchased this with its Windows XP driver, right? So this is the Wingman Force GP. It has feedback, like rumble feedback, and your brake and accelerator pedals, right? This is still compatible with Windows 10. And Project Cars, which is a game that I, purchased, I think, last week, but couldn't really run well on the R9 290. Now, with this wheel and the 1080 is just gonna be sweet. I know it's gonna be a blast. I can't wait to play it. In fact, after this video, that's the next thing I hook up, right? So again, what does that give you, right? Well, they've got awesome desk mounts, right? So one of my future projects, and most of you have seen my arcade machine over there, another one of my future projects is a chair / kind of cockpit, right? That I'm going to build, which is going to be mobile, comfortable, and allow me literally in front of my desk with the VR helmet, whether it's the Rift or the HTC, to basically feel like I'm in a cockpit, right? So what my eyes see visually, my body's going to feel from a tactile point of view, because I'm going to be seated in a cockpit. And I'm going to make it flexible enough that I can mount this, right? Or interchange it and put flight stick and throttle. But for a racing game, nothing beats the proper control. So there you have it. Those are basically just a couple of options, right? Admittedly, kind of the more entry level, but all in, you're under $200 for superior controls. Look on Craigslist. You can often find these things used on Craigslist, eBay, or used on Amazon, right? Like, you don't have to buy these things new. In fact, the reason I settled for this one is because I just missed out. There was a Cytec X52 Pro Craigslist ad for $80, basically never used. And like I said, that's normally $275. Tax in, you're over $300. Unfortunately, he'd sold it literally, in the previous few hours. So I ended up buying this, and I don't regret it, right? It's the cheaper option, and for me means I can do more, right? So the wheel, I think, was around $100. Like I said, it's that old, and still, because of USB, it's still a viable device, right? So $40, 80 for the HOTAS, and then maybe 100 for the wheel. So, but all three of those give you that versatility with the Vive and the Rift to further immerse yourself, right? So really, what are we missing? We're missing smell-o-vision. We can't smell it, and that's probably a good thing, right? But even stuff like putting my air conditioner, I got a portable AC, having that cold air blow on you adds to the immersion of sitting in an elite spaceship, right? I know that sounds so nerdoramic, but it's so true. It just adds to the immersion. And these controls dial that up another factor of 100, right? So the proper controls. Did I miss any controls? Let me know, guys, in the comments below. Hit subscribe if you like these types of videos, and feel free to comment. I try to, reply to every comment I get, even if you don't agree with me, because dialogue is a good thing. And like I said, I used to be a real elitist snob. I've come around, and I'm always open to other ideas or thoughts. Whether I agree with them or not, I usually try something at least once before forming an opinion. Alright guys, that's it for tonight's video. Hope you guys found it informative. Until next time, cheers.